Okay, we're live. First live stream back from my 15-day water fast. I talk about that a little bit in an episode that I just did with Dr. Edith, which I'll release either just before or after this one. So I don't want to get into all the details with that, but highly, highly, highly recommend it for anyone who's never done an extended water fast before. I wanted to do it a little bit longer, but I have to speak at Music and Sky in the refeeding period, which is such a weird word. My wife hates it. Refeeding. It sounds very weird, but is probably the hardest part. And I just wanted to be able to eat normal food prior to going to Music and Sky. So there's that. And then the second thing before I talk here with Amanda and Robin, sorry, you're just sitting on screen watching me while I make these announcements. But the second thing is we just launched our version 2 of the Way Forward membership, and really, really stoked about it because for the lower tier, and I hesitate to call it lower tier, like one's better than the other, but the lower tier, you can pay what you want in order to be a part of our membership. It's all based on a value for value model, meaning you pay whatever you think the value we provide is, whatever that is for you. And that gets you access to our marketplace, which we have access to the best deals with the best holistic health brands out there. We also have a business directory that has discounts that are exclusive for members. And then we also have a member directory where you can just type in your zip code and find other like-minded men and women near you. Just set a radius and it populates all the men and women in your area who are also members of the Way Forward. And again, what's rad about it is you pay what you think, we're worth. So yeah, with that, I'm excited for this conversation with Robin and Amanda. So let's start with this. Let's just hear your background stories. Like what led you to do, breast implant illness advocacy?
Well, I'll start. My name's Amanda Porta. I have worked in the beauty industry over 20 years, and I was sick from my breast implants for 7.5 years. It was, for me, my spiritual awakening. I sought out 67 different practitioners during that time, none of which asked even if I had an implanted medical device. I realized fairly early on, probably a year into my journey, that Western medicine, they just were not getting it. In even the inflammation, I gained up to 57 pounds at one point. And if you knew my body frame, it's pretty tiny. That was pretty alarming. And Western medicine practitioners that I saw couldn't even recognize the inflammation as a warning sign that something was really wrong. It led me on a quest to fall in love with holistic medicine. I met a German naturopath along the way in 2012, and I said, teach me everything you can about the human body, because I think I need to understand in order to save my life. That's just the download I was getting. I also was getting the download that holistic medicine would be the future. And I actually started trying to infuse it with the plastic surgery beauty industry back in 2012, because, without health on the inside, how can you possibly radiate health and wellness on the outside? But, the world just wasn't ready for that yet. But along my journey, I would read stories, in fact, and it kind of gives me chills now, like Crystal Hefner's story in 2016. And I looked at my boss at the time and I said, that woman sounds just like me, her symptoms. Could that be what's wrong? Is it my breast implants? Do I need to replace them? And he looked me right in the eye and he said, there is no illness associated with breast implants, Amanda. And women like this sound crazy. Don't listen to them. Now that's where I went wrong. I should have looked more into it at the time, but I trusted him. I thought he had my best interest in mind. He was largely a breast surgeon, and I was making this man a lot of money. So why would he lie? And ironically, in 2004, when I got my breast implants, I had gotten saline the year before, because at the time, there was even a moratorium on breast implants, the silicone ones, because so many women were sick. I'm now thinking that they were probably sick with breast implant illness, although it was all blamed on the ruptures of these breast implants. And I suppose that would be true as well. And so when I had to get them replaced a year later, because I got capsular contracture, the surgeon said, well, I think we'll put silicone in. And even though I was in my 20s and really didn't know anything about implants at the time, I said, well, isn't silicone bad? And he said, oh, no, no. These are made so much better now, and we're reintroducing them to the market. You'll even be part of a study.
Oh my goodness.
So, I mean, you think, well, who better to go to than a surgeon who's working for the manufacturers and is involved in studies?
Yeah, but it's also kind of sketchy. Like you'll be a part of the study, like one of the introductory studies to test if these are safe, even though he's already trying to reassure you that they're safe.
Right. And,
Yeah.
I was never part of a study. It was actually never brought up again. And now, with all of my followers, I've had many women reach out to me saying they too were promised to be part of a study and never were with these same implants.
Wow.
So, when I figured it out in the end of 2018, started putting the puzzle pieces together because my colonic practitioner brought it to my attention, saying that she was seeing this so much. Then I started, going to consults with Beverly Hills plastic surgeons who, right, this is the plastic surgery capital of the world. They should be well versed on all aspects of breast implants. And the first three said to me, similar to what my prior boss said, Amanda, this is not real. These women are all crazy. That was the term they used. And I said, so you're telling me in just one support group alone, over 150,000 women, they're all crazy and they're all conspiring to make this up? And they looked at me and they said, yeah. And that was really startling to me. And really, they didn't care about my health. They just kept saying, well, you're not going to be happy with what it looks like.
Wow.
So I said, well, you let me worry about what it's going to look like, because I can't feel like this anymore.
Yeah.
And yeah.
You talk about some of your symptoms. You said inflammation was one of the biggest ones, and you mentioned how uh, allopathic doctors essentially couldn't recognize that the breast implants were a problem. I mean, we were talking prior to recording about how there's a lot of parallels between this and vaccines. And I think that's totally true, because you're presenting and you have these issues. You've probably at this point already heard from several other people, or at least you're talking about, what was her name? Hefner?
Crystal Hefner.
Crystal Hefner, yeah, and her story. And you're being gaslighted by all these doctors, many of whom probably aren't aware of their toxicity for the most part, because they're conditioned to believe that they're safe. And we'll talk about conflicts of interest and stuff later. But what led you to really realize, like, no, it's these breast implants that are causing these issues?
Well, what I thought was very odd is when I got them out at the beginning of 2019 and started feeling better immediately. I started talking to other practitioners, my friend who's an anesthesiologist, another who works in the ER. And I said, these breast implants, you should see how many women are in these support groups. And I just got mine out, and I can't tell you how much better I feel. My hair has stopped falling out. The inflammation went away almost overnight. And they said, oh, Amanda, don't be ridiculous. Your breast implants, they're safe. And I said, well, but how do you know that they're safe? I'd even hear it from dentists.
Wow.
And I'd say, well, how do you know they're safe? And the only logical explanation I've come to think is when they got back on the market, similar to, remember how we hear from like Project Mockingbird, when the brain hears something enough times,
Safe and effective for vaccines. So yeah.
Yes, it will register it as true, even if it's false. And so I think that messaging went out after the silicone ones were reintroduced to the market, that practitioners just assumed, well, they're safe. And I kind of say to the dentist, like, stay in your own lane. You have no business, telling women how their breast implants are affecting their health.
Yeah, and that's the tough thing. And I'll turn it over to you in a second, Robin, for your story as well. And I'd love to hear how both of you connected. But it's the same thing when it comes to vaccines. You have all these families, namely parents, who are talking about how their child's, or multiple children, their health completely reversed after receiving multiple doses in one sitting, completely regressed. and they're being gaslighted by practitioners, and then they really have to do their due diligence to go research for themselves and look into safety studies or lack thereof, and then also find other parents who've experienced the exact same thing. And it sounds very similar with this.
It is actually very similar. And in my research, which started after I had implants for a breast cancer diagnosis. So I had a double mastectomy. My team of doctors, just kind of moved me through the system, had reconstruction with implants, and I got sick right away. I know a lot of women, it takes some amount of years for the symptoms to creep up one by one. The first year it's 1 or 2 symptoms. The next year it's 3 more. But mine started right away. I only had my implants in for 4 months. My body rejected them immediately. And I didn't do any chemotherapy. I didn't do radiation. So I couldn't figure out why I was feeling so crappy. I mean, I felt like I was in chemotherapy and radiation. So I figured it out pretty quickly, even though before my surgery, I researched and I Googled, are breast implants safe? And just like Amanda said, everything I came across said they're safe and effective. The FDA says they're safe and effective. And again, with the just repetitive regurgitation, right? And so what's interesting is the problems that we're seeing today, 60 years after breast implants have been introduced to the market, those same symptoms are coming up over and over and over again, regardless of whether it's silicone or saline, textured implants, smooth implants. And when I started doing research about this, because of how it happened to me, I realized it's not just breast implants. It's all medical devices. It's all medical implants. It's vaccines. It's pharmaceutical drugs. And when you start really doing the research and you look at who's funding the research and you start looking at who are the doctors doing this research and who do they really work for, that's where I had my grand awakening, because I started putting 2 and 2 together, and I'm thinking, how is it that these people are taking millions of dollars from breast implant manufacturers, yet they're publishing studies in medical journals saying, yeah, they're perfectly safe? There's a huge conflict of interest there. And, I know people that have vaccine-injured children or grandchildren. I know people who have anything from mesh implants to dental implants, pins and rods in their neck from a car accident or in their leg from an injury. And it all comes back full circle. The symptoms are exactly the same. It's like a systemic illness, like your body is literally rejecting these foreign objects, which makes sense. And so when Amanda said she started really looking into holistic medicine, because if you really look at what these objects are, it makes sense that our body is going to reject them. They're not naturally occurring on this earth. So really it's the research that got me into advocacy, because I thought, whoa, this is really wrong. And not only is it wrong, why didn't my doctors tell me this information? As a breast cancer patient, I had an entire team of doctors managing my care. Not one of them told me that this could happen. So
how many of them encouraged you to do it? Like as you brought it up?
Oh, absolutely. My breast surgeon was telling me how we're going to put your breasts back and they're going to be beautiful and they're going to be perfect and they're going to be big. And I was just kind of like, whoa, hold on a second. I don't care about any of that. I just want to live. I just want to survive. This was my 3rd cancer. So I don't have the luxury of just being able to worry about what I look like. I'm just in survival mode, and, at the time that I was diagnosed, I just wanted to get on with my life. I wanted to continue and finish raising my family and just enjoy my life as best as I could. So I wasn't really interested in multiple surgeries and revisions and all the things that come with a breast cancer diagnosis. And Amanda's absolutely right. She nailed it when she said, these surgeons only are worried about aesthetics. They don't research the products they're using, whether it's Botox, fillers, vaccines. They just do what they're told. They regurgitate what they've learned, and then they just regurgitate that to the patients. And the patients believe them and trust them because they're a medical doctor. They went to medical school and they should know these things. And that's where, I'm hesitant to say don't trust any medical doctors. But what I do want to encourage people to do is find the ones that understand how the body works, that understand how the body reacts with certain devices and certain products that are ingested, or implanted in their body.
Yeah. And it's rare to find those doctors that will acknowledge that, which is the unfortunate thing. So how did you two meet? along this advocacy journey?
Well, when I got them out, and literally from my recovery bed, I am on the support groups answering questions from women, because I knew that having worked in the industry, having gone through this, and now getting explanted, I would have a big voice in it. And I thought, I want to give back however I can. I didn't even think I could ever work in plastic surgery again. I did go on for 4 years to work for a surgeon, the surgeon who removed mine in Beverly Hills, and help with just these particular subset of women.
Does he focus on removal mostly?
Well, now, because of I've been so outspoken, that
How
is
can he
just
not? How can he like look
Yeah.
the other way at this point? Yeah.
Right. Yes. And so, I mean, that was my focus, to give back in that way. But with Robin, I already knew that there were obvious advocates out there advocating before I even went through it. And I was just lucky. But I wanted to be with the right advocates who I knew would be there for the long haul. Because let's face it, everybody's excited about it when they are first going through it, but not every woman, kind of decides to do what Robin's done and some of the amazing other advocates. I also wanted to say, though, too, while we were speaking about it, a huge symptom of mine was a stagnant lymphatic system. You could see it in my legs and my limbs. And I kept saying that to the allopathic doctors. My lymph.
How many
there's
different
something going
specialists
on
did
with
you
it.
see?
67
total, and not one of them could
Yeah.
like come to terms with it. It might be the breast implants.
No, not even at the time. Interestingly enough, not even the holistic ones had it on their intake forms, but now I'm seeing it more and more and more. And I was just lucky that I just happened to go to this colonic practitioner who said, I just had 11 women this year alone who looked and sounded just like you. And then they got their implants out and they started getting better, which to me at the time, I mean, it was like entering the twilight zone. I'm like, what is she talking about? I mean, I was defensive at first too.
Yeah.
But it was interesting to me, the Western meds would like scratch their heads and look at me and they'd say, well, you're too young for lymphatic cancer. I said, well, why did we just jump to lymphatic cancer? I'm just saying it's stagnant, which could happen for a multitude of different reasons.
Yeah.
Well, so the breast implants in my mind act as, think of a dam, right? When debris gets in the way, what happens? The water stops flowing. Well, as humans, right, we're mostly water. So if you're going to put like a roadblock, if you will, here, now wouldn't that put off not only the natural energy and water flow to the body? So like if we're looking at Chinese medicine, I'm sure they would never go for these because it just doesn't make sense. But it's why when we remove them, women will say almost immediately, I can breathe better. They start getting more oxygen intake to their brain as well. Doc Ammon did a study on that. And he talks about women who have breast implants not getting enough oxygen to their brain. He did it with Danica Patrick. Their skin, you can see the color come back because your lymphatic system and your circulation, they work hand in hand. So it doesn't surprise me that women start feeling better almost immediately.
Yeah. What are some of the other symptoms that you frequently come across, especially that you've been doing this for a while now, and you especially, Robin, hearing from so many other women who've had the same experience?
It's so interesting because, like I said before, it's pretty much all implantable devices. I've seen the same types of systemic.
I have 2 screws in my shoulder, and that's causing nerve damage. So, like,
absolutely, yeah. So it's inflammation, thyroid issues. We have a ton of women with thyroid issues, gut issues. A lot of the materials that these devices are made of, they upset the endocrine system, they upset the lymphatic system, and fatigue, chronic illness, chronic infections. I had 2 bald spots in my hair, like my hair was falling out, half of my eyelashes fell out. I was having skin rashes. I mean, I felt like my whole body was shutting down. And, my doctors had suggested doing chemotherapy and I declined, and they weren't happy with me about that. And now I know, after doing research on that, I know all the reasons why. But at one point, I had gone back to my surgeon 4 times with all these complaints. I had severe neck and shoulder pain. I was in physical therapy the whole time. And all she did was prescribe pills for me, pharmaceutical medications. And I'm like, something's not adding up here. This doesn't feel right. And it wasn't until obviously I was doing the research, but at one point I thought my cancer came back. And it was literally
Wow.
metastasizing everywhere and killing me because I felt like every single part of my body was shutting down. My
Wow.
eyes were very bloodshot. My skin just didn't look right. So those are the most common symptoms we see, but it
At what
is,
point did you, at what point did you make, like, come to understand that it was the breast implants causing this? I know you said 4 months in.
yeah, I had
What was the
severe
final straw?
yeah, I had severe insomnia. And at the time
Mm.
I was 44 years old. I had never had sleep problems, even after having children. And I would wake up at 2:30 in the morning, wide awake, but so fatigued and exhausted, but I couldn't go back to sleep. And it was very debilitating. And that was probably my worst symptom that messed with me the most. So when I would wake up in the middle of the night, I started joining these breast cancer forums. And I would connect with other women all over the world. And I kept reiterating what my
Oh, don't know what happened to Robin. Okay. We'll just pick up with you. You
Yeah.
dropped off for a
What
second
I'm
too.
seeing most in patients that come in, so I'm just reporting exactly what I'm seeing every day. Hair loss is a big one, the fatigue, which that can go back to your lymph. Also, so many women will experience Epstein-Barr virus
Mm.
because that lays dormant in our gut. And so it can be activated with a low immune system, which prompted me to do research on that. I even found an article from the New York Times in 1993 that says, breast implants known to irritate the immune system.
Wow.
And that's really ultimately what I found. It's like when you have this many little symptoms like that, one of the Western medicine docs did say, he's like, it's something with your immune system. And I'm thinking, but that just doesn't make sense. I'm a person who never even got the common cold. It was so
Mhm.
rare. Only if I fly on an airplane is the only time I get a cold.
Mhm.
I'm so healthy. And the fatigue from that and the inflammation, I mean, I was literally walking around like a retired football player.
Wow.
Even though I'm a dancer, I work out now still twice a day, and I'm going to be 50 this year.
Mhm.
So it just didn't make sense. And sadly, women who are going through this, so you start going to the doctors, and then the stress of them saying there's nothing wrong with you, the gaslighting,
Yeah.
it can't be that. What that does to a person is like 100 times worse than how you're just feeling from the fatigue and the toxic overload from the breast implants.
Mm. This is probably a rhetorical question. But what do you think is the, as someone who's in the beauty industry, why is it so difficult to get women who have breast implants to understand how toxic they are?
Oh, I think there are so many reasons why. I just see, and I get, like I told you, when the colonic practitioner first brought it to my attention, there's that phase of denial. I think that we go through phases of it. It's, shocking at first when you start reading the chemicals in
Mhm.
them and the heavy
Can you list
metals.
off some of those, the chemicals that are common in breast implants?
I mean, arsenic
Mhm.
is one of them. Again, I don't know exactly how much. It will differ in things.
Mhm.
But I would always ask, like, well, why does any have to be in
Mhm.
these implants?
Mhm.
Methyl ethyl ketone is one that stood out to me only because I talk about this with everyone, right? I had to get my car towed one day. So I got in the tow truck and I said to the tow truck driver, how long do we have? He said, oh, about 15 minutes. I said, let's talk about breast implants.
Wow.
I mean, he was probably like, okay, lady.
Yeah, like what?
But at
Yeah.
the end of it, he said, my wife doesn't have breast implants, but a lot of my friends' wives do. And thank you for sharing this with me.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah. So at your next barbecue, please share it with everybody you know. Because if you're going to block it on social media, I
Mhm.
guess we'll just have to get it out our way, right?
Yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from with that. That's what I do too. So,
Yeah. So, but I brought it up to my car mechanic while I was waiting one day. He just was asking me what I do. And I said, I'm an advocate for breast implant illness. And he said, oh, and I said, as a matter of fact, look at these ingredients that are in these. And the first one that stood out to him was methyl ethyl ketone. And he said, Amanda, do you know that we use that in, working on cars? And he said, if one of my mechanics even um, smells a little bit of it, they can end up in the ER.
wow. And
But
that's
that's
going into your body.
in the shell of the breast implant. And
Wow.
for women who have the saline, because that's what we were told was the safer type
Yeah.
back then, They didn't realize, nor did we at the time, but the shell is still made of the same chemicals as the silicone ones, including silicone. So you're really not just getting saline.
How do you? So I hear this quite a bit, that there are safer alternatives to breast implants, and even like newer technologies that they're coming out with. And what are your thoughts on that? Are any of them safe?
All I will say is from my experience working with these women the last 4 years, and like I said, the phone started ringing off the hook when I did a couple of my segments for KTLA here in Los Angeles. What we're seeing is no matter if they're saline or silicone, it's pretty, even across the board. Doesn't matter the manufacturer. I've seen all of them. I don't know that it's necessarily an issue as much with the type as much as it is with the human body and how it affects that. And it affects everyone differently. I have some women who it's just inflammation causing pain, rheumatoid arthritis, that sort of thing. Some women who just have autoimmune illness. I'm very lucky. I never was diagnosed, but I did have symptoms of autoimmune. Some women who just get the fatigue, the hair loss. It's usually different segments, and it affects women at different times. There are some women who have had them for 30 years and they claim like, oh, I feel fine. But then they'll get them out for, say, a different reason. And they'll say, I feel like a different person now.
Yeah.
Completely. So, and again, I've never said I'm trying to get these off the market. I just wanted to be here for women who might have had the same experience as I did, just because if I had had someone to talk to, I would have appreciated that.
Yeah. Okay, Robin, you dropped off. I don't remember where we left off. It's okay. It happens.
Sorry.
I think we were talking about what you had, like insomnia, and that's what made you really realize that you had breast implant illness.
Yeah, a girl reached out to me in the middle of the night on one of my sleepless nights and told me that she got really sick from her breast implants. And I'm like, sick how? And she gave me her list of symptoms, and I was literally checking off every single one because they were the same as mine. And I was really frustrated because I kept going back to my surgeon and she didn't tell me any of this. So as soon as I figured out that that's what it was, I made the decision to have them removed. And this woman that shared her information with me, she actually found out when she was going to remove her breast implants, she found out that she had breast cancer. So she had a double mastectomy and chose not to reconstruct at all. So when I met her, which ironically, she lives in my hometown, like 10 minutes from my house,
Wow.
she's completely flat. And we met for lunch one day and I'm like, you look fabulous. You look healthy. I'm miserable. I want to be like you. So I actually had, she worked for a plastic surgeon and I had him remove my implants and I'm totally flat. So, and I literally woke up from surgery and I have felt amazing ever since. And that was really my aha moment. And that was, it was so many mixed emotions for me because I was elated that I felt better immediately. But at the same time, I was so frustrated that this FDA approved safe and effective medical device made me that sick and that it's on the market. And how many other breast cancer women and just women all over the world are suffering the way I was. I mean, I was at my rock bottom. I've had cancer 3 times, but having breast implant illness and being that sick, that was the lowest point of my entire life.
Wow.
I was on my bedroom floor crying because I just felt like everything was shutting down. And I'm a tough cookie. So that's what really led me into my advocacy journey. And I was so angry that my surgeon and my doctors didn't tell me. I went down to my state capitol and had a meeting with some of the senators on the health committee. And I told them my story. And I brought a few other women with me that were local, that were in a breast implant illness support group. And we lobbied to get a law passed for proper informed consent for breast implant surgery. So now in the state of Arizona, any woman that gets breast implants gets a checklist that I created of all the things that I wasn't told so that I know this won't happen to any other women, because it happened to me and I felt like I needed to do something about it. I'm also working on that same legislation in 5 other states. But when the plastic surgeon societies got wind of it, they went to all those states and stopped my law from being passed.
Wow. And literally what you're doing, right, is you're just coming up with a checklist for the women who want to get breast implants of, hey, this could happen, this could happen, this could happen, this has been reported to other women, or here's all the things that, maybe all the, I guess you tell me about what's on this checklist.
I mean, basically just letting them know that for 60 years of breast implant history, breast implants are known to cause autoimmune diseases, rare diseases, cancer, and systemic illness, like Amanda and I had.
And are there
And I think
studies
it's
corroborating this? I believe you 100%, but like
absolutely.
yeah, see, that's the thing.
Absolutely.
And it's the same thing with vaccines too. There are studies corroborating that vaccines are not proven to be safe or effective. And somehow the entire medical community and the entire world really completely ignores them.
Yes. And when you look at the studies that the FDA is looking at for these vaccines, these devices, these pharmaceutical drugs, these are highly funded studies by industry.
Mhm.
And I've spoken a few times now at the American Society of Plastic Surgeons annual meeting on a patient panel. And I encourage doctors, if you want to know the truth about any of this, whether it's vaccines, medical devices, pharmaceutical drugs, go look at the medical journals that have publications of doctors who don't have financial interest in the product.
Mhm.
So I started looking at the rheumatology journals, endocrinology, all these other medical practitioners that were doing studies on breast implants, and we're finding all these different neurological symptoms and systemic illness. And those were the studies that I was reading, and those are the studies that these doctors should be reading.
Yeah.
And none of this is new, whether it's vaccines, drugs, or implants. These incidences have been happening for decades.
Yeah.
And they're being ignored. And I really want to stress the FDA. I've had multiple meetings with them. I work with them on a regular basis, but they are not doing their due diligence to protect the American public. They have within their authority the ability to get this information out to all of the medical community. I've personally asked them 3 times to issue a healthcare provider letter, and they won't do it. And these cancers that are being caused by breast implants, some of them are absolutely horrific, with mortality rates of 50% of patients being dead within 6 months of getting this cancer. But yet the FDA is not letting all the medical industry know. I mean, OBGYNs, 100% of their patient population are women. They should know this information. And the FDA just thinks they've done a good enough job. And I actually had some really important meetings with them about this and getting information to not only the public, but the medical community. They admitted to me that their communications about these breast implant cancers reached 320,000 people.
Wow.
About 50,000 people on their website, about 50,000 people on their YouTube channel, and about 250,000 people from email subscribers that want to know updates about FDA information. But I did a little research after they told me, how proud they were that they reached 320,000 people. And I realized there's just over 1 million practicing licensed active medical physicians in our country. And there's 3.8 million nurses. So a total of 4.8 million medical providers. And that doesn't include like acupuncture specialists or massage therapists or other practitioners. 3.8 million people, and the FDA only reached 320,000 people.
Yeah. Well, what's so beautiful, Alec, is the nurses that come to me and say, we've been following your story. Thank you so much for speaking out. We've been sick for years. These are our frontline workers, by the way, right? That we depend on. If they feel like I felt, you can't even perform your job. I could barely even blow dry my hair to go out for the evening. That's how weak I was. Wow. And they're saying, and all of our colleagues say, oh, well, we can tell you're sick, but I mean, there's no way it's your implants. So they don't get them out, just like me. And then 5 years later, they just finally say, I'm done with this. They remove them and they get better. So now I have all of these nurses doing what I did and going around to the hospital and telling all their colleagues it was my breast implants. So slowly they are starting to wake up because they're seeing those of us in the industry going through this.
Yes. And the doctors are seeing it too. That's why we have surgeons that specifically dedicate their careers now to removing breast implants. I mean, we have some that is all they do all week long, and they're seeing it in their practice. And I think it's important what you pointed out too earlier, Alec, about finding the good doctors. There are good doctors out there. And when you start networking, like we connected with you, when you start networking with like-minded people, that's where you're going to find the people that are truly going to help others. And, they are going to stick their neck out on the line to expose the truth. And I think we've all seen so much abuse of that and the censorship, especially through the pandemic. Amanda and I have been dealing with censorship issues ever since we started advocating. I'll have a really great post, and then all of a sudden, it'll get killed because it's so creepy. They have people literally watching our pages and reporting us.
Mm-hmm.
Of course.
So, and we just have to think outside the box. We have to connect with like-minded people that have platforms that we can share our experiences and just connect the two and, all these things together. And people will start realizing that it's out there and how corrupt the system really is.
When you meet with the FDA, and yes, the system is extremely corrupt, and that's where this statistic always sits in the back of my mind when it comes to the FDA. The FDA's drug regulatory budget, 75% of it comes from the drug companies that it regulates.
Yep.
And I think it was 1992, the Drug User Fee Act that allowed for that. But I mean, that's insane when it comes to conflicts of interest. So, my question is, when you talk with the FDA, when representatives from the FDA, what are they saying? Are they acknowledging the concerns, or do they seem concerned, or is it kind of just like, oh yeah, we'll get to it?
They know the concerns, but just like the pharmaceutical drugs, the medical device industry provides about 60% of the funding for their fees. So they're heavily tied with industry. And if anyone has done research into the people that work for the FDA, I actually testified twice at the FDA in 2018 and 2019 at their medical device panel meeting in Washington, D.C. And I started researching the people that are on these panels at the FDA. Some of them have been there for 20 or 30 years. I have gone back because I became this junkie, this research junkie, and I've gone back and read transcripts of these meetings from the year 2000, 2003, 2005. The same people are sitting there listening to our stories. They know. And I at the plastic surgery meeting that I was just at this past October, one of the FDA people that I meet with all the time was sitting 2 rows in front of me during a presentation where we watched a woman literally getting mutilated because she got cancer from her breast implants, and they cut a basketball-sized hole in her chest. They removed her sternum, 4 ribs. The cancer invaded her heart. And she's literally sitting in front of me watching the same presentation that I was watching. And she does nothing about it. That's the problem.
Yeah. Oh, she dropped off again. Oh, there she is. Okay.
Oh, am I back?
Yeah, you're back. You're back.
They know all of it. And so for me, that's what I have a problem with. If you know this, and we've had conversations about this, and we've seen how the manufacturers have these meetings talking about the benefit to risk ratio. And that's very disturbing to me because they're thinking, well, there's only a few 100,000 women sick from these implants or getting cancer, but there's millions of women who love the way their boobs look. Mm-hmm. But that's a problem for me because I also want to point out that the medical device industry, the reports of adverse events are not accurate. So if you want to go online and look at how many people are having problems with the device, we discovered in 2019, the FDA was hiding over 446,000 reports of women harmed by breast implants.
Wow.
They had a program called alternative summary reporting. And when we brought it to their attention, when I say we, I mean advocates that came before me as well, they stopped using that. But as reporters and investigative journalists started looking into alternative summary reporting, they realized the FDA was hiding 6.8 million reports of dental implants, breast implants. So why are you doing that? Why are you not being transparent with the public? Why are you allowing devices onto the market that haven't been tested for safety? There is not a single study out there that proves breast implants are safe to be in the human body. Not one. Trust me, I've looked and I've even asked both plastic surgeon societies. No one can give me that study. Not one single study, but we have hundreds of studies showing patients have been harmed, patients get sick, and patients get cancer.
My
So
goodness.
it's really the risk to ratio benefit. They don't care if a few people or a few thousand people or just a couple million people die, because they are making billions of dollars off the other people that are still walking around with this device in their body.
And we have to realize, Alec, while we're so immersed in it, I feel like so many women know. And if you look at social media any given day and you follow the hashtag explant or breast implant removal, it's so many women daily. And we're talking there's celebrities or influencers removing them and having a positive response to it. When I always say this, so maybe, I don't know, 3 million people in the world know about this right now, but wait until 10 million people start putting and connecting the dots, putting the puzzle pieces together. 20 million, right? They just haven't, it hasn't downloaded yet to them. They're not making the correlation yet, right?
Well, I mean, I would imagine it's extremely hard when you have these like unrealistic, very superficial beauty standards, especially in Western countries. Well, I mean, not even just in Western countries, I'd say across the world really now, but especially in places like Hollywood and Beverly Hills, et cetera, et cetera. But then also, I would imagine that like the pharmaceutical industry lobbies so heavily to sway legislation in their favor, I would imagine the medical device and medical implant industry, and then also the plastic surgery industry are, swaying legislation in their favor as well. So what corruption have you come across and personally experienced with respect to those industries?
For me, when I was passing my law in Arizona, I actually, at the 11th hour, our governor had already signed it into law. And then we had, I think, 2 months to finalize the patient checklist. And when the plastic surgery community realized that the unthinkable happened, and, because I didn't have, I didn't go to them and say, hey, let's work together. I just did this on my own. And then that kind of upset them because I went over their head. So they wanted to become a part of it. And we actually, my 2 state medical boards in Arizona, my senator and myself received an email from one of the plastic surgeon societies that is known to cover up all of this and actually put out there some of the skewed science, because their members are actually on the boards of these medical journals, and they get to pick and choose which articles get published, which studies get published. So they sent a letter from their legal team insisting that they be a part of this process because they wanted to have a say in what we were doing. And I'm super grateful for my senator in Arizona who stood up and said, these people aren't even licensed to practice medicine in the state of Arizona. They have no say in what we're doing here. This is our law, and this is how we're passing it.
That's great.
The governor signed it into law, and it went as we had planned. But when that happened, they realized, well, she's doing this in 5 other states. We need to stop her. So then they go to the medical boards in the other states I'm working at, and they're telling them that it's not necessary to have this law passed. We've got this under control. We give proper informed consent. This is just a bunch of paperwork that's going to confuse patients. And so
what were you told? Let's stop there for a second. When you both of you, when they say they give proper informed consent, what were you told?
I'm so glad you brought that up, because people do this with vaccines, medical devices, pharmaceutical drugs.
Of course.
They tell you, well, there's a list of symptoms here, but it's so rare that never happens. It's so rare. That word rare, I'll admit, it triggers me, because these cases aren't rare. They're just choosing not to,
of course,
acknowledge them.
Yeah.
Of course.
Well, I say that too. Just having worked in the industry so many years and I was responsible in many cases for having the patients sign their informed consent paperwork. And, so many of them, it's a stack this thick. And they would say, do I really have to sit here and sign this? And I'd always say, absolutely. You must, read through. It's to your benefit, obviously. But the women, you see it, they just are signing, not reading it. But I always say, and that's the reason I started advocating, was when women would say in these support groups, well, I did go back to my plastic surgeon and he said, well, you should have known that you could get autoimmune disease from these. Well, you should have known that they could cause hormonal disruption, because many doctors will at least admit to that. And I'd say, well, we certainly don't say that in a consult. That'd be like going to buy a new car and saying, well, the engine could totally fall out in 100 miles or what have you.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to sell it like that. They sell it like these are, like the next best thing there is, right? Better than sliced bread.
Yeah.
Like these are it in our industry.
And it's disturbing too. There's a small group of surgeons that are the leadership basically of the Aesthetic Society of Plastic Surgeons. And back in the early 2000s, they heavily promoted a textured breast implant as the gold standard, the new gummy bears. These are not your grandma's runny implants that got all those women sick in the 90s that caused silicone implants to be banned. And they were really promoting these implants as the next best thing. And fast forward over a decade, those implants were the ones causing the highest cases of cancers.
Wow.
And they were recalled worldwide. Well, what's interesting is those same exact plastic surgeons who are still the leaders of their society have now jumped ship from Allergan, which had the worldwide recall. So now they're like tainted. And now they all work for a new company called Motiva, which is Establishment Labs. And Motiva has a new breast implant that has a microchip in it. And it's not approved yet by the FDA, but it is approved in 68 other countries, mainly Europe and Latin America. And the really concerning thing about this new breast implant is those same people were in charge of the clinical trials that we did here in the United States for 3 years on that implant. They were
On
the
the allergen
same,
one?
they were the same people from the Allergan
Wow.
one. And now they're doing this implant. And you want to know what's interesting is I've read their studies that say they're safe and effective. Almost word for word, their exact testimony to the FDA about those Allergan recalled implants that cause cancer. They're just recycling the same jargon, regurgitating the same studies, just slapping a different name on it.
And they're saying, with a new
I've
company.
placed so many of these implants and none of my patients are having problems. But I want to be clear, the patients aren't going back to the plastic surgeons when they have problems. They're going to an endocrinologist. They're going to a GI specialist because their gut is messed up. They're going to thyroid doctors because their thyroid levels are just off the charts. And so in their defense, most of the patients aren't coming back to plastic surgeons. They're going to other doctors to find out why they're having all these health complications.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, they know, they've experienced this. The way they speak of patients in their meetings and their presentations, even their CMEs. I've attended some of their CME classes where they have to take classes for continuing medical education. The way they speak of these patients is that, this is just a made up social media disease. It's a trend. These women are talking to each other online, finding each other in groups, and they're all just connecting and spewing the same story that's false. But this is the same story that's been going on for 60 years with women with breast implants. And we're not getting anything out of this. Do you think Amanda and I want to go on social media and expose ourselves and be ridiculed and mocked and said we're crazy?
No.
I mean, nobody's going to sign up for that.
No.
So,
And, the way they speak about them, Alec, that's the problem that I had when I went in for the first 3 consults saying they were crazy. So these women who are largely your patient base, who have paid for the fancy house that you have and the nice car that you're driving, you're calling them crazy. It's so disgusting that's why I'm exposing this as well. How dare they? When these women who are trying to put, their children first, trying to put food on the table. I don't even know how you could have raised kids. I couldn't have, feeling that way. And you're going to then make them a victim again? That's like total narcissistic abuse. And it's disgusting.
Yeah. Yeah. It's unbelievable. And it's like, there's a lot of responsibility on the industry itself, in the plastic surgery community, of course. And then on the flip side of that, I want to touch on this a little bit too. Because I'd imagine you have quite a few women who know that they're having breast implant illness, but they're so tied to keeping their breast implants because, I'll speak very generally here, because they don't love themselves internally first. So how many women have you come across that have that issue, that they know that this is causing them to become deathly ill, but they keep it because they're like, well, my husband likes them, or my boyfriend likes them, or I get more boys this way, or more boys, I get more attention from people, or I feel better about myself. I like the way my body looks. And how often does that happen?
Many. I mean, it's a process, like I said, because I think at first you're in denial. There's a normal progress to this. And, I'll just say to women sometimes, and it's okay, you're not ready yet. And I'll tell you, when you get sick enough, trust me, vanity goes out the window. I was praying to God in my last days, saying, God, if you'll just find me a doctor to remove these, I even bet it will look great. You don't care. I didn't care what it was going to look like. I just wanted to live. It changes your entire perspective. And perhaps they're not sick enough yet. And I have had women who weren't ready. And then 3 years later, we heard from them. And sadly, their health continued to decline. So then they were ready. That's sad to me, of course. And the women who have said to me, I'm sick, but I can't get them out because either I don't want a scar or my husband would leave me. And first of all, like, you can't even see my scars. I wish you could see them more because to me, it's a symbol of what I've been through.
And I think that's why it's so important for women to share their journey about this, because it is a very private issue. We're talking about our breasts, and like, I have no breasts now. I'm a mastectomy patient that's completely flat. But that is so powerful when you see women speaking out and they're like, I was so sick, I don't care what I look like. I was so sick, I've had cancer 3 times, and having breast implants was worse than having cancer. I mean, when women see the power of those statements, it's almost like we're empowering them to do the same. And it is going to be okay. And they find a whole tribe of women that feel the same way and will uplift them and support them and love on them through their journey. And to see women that are like, my health is more important, that's self-confidence, right?
Yeah.
And it's so empowering for women. And I really think the plastic surgeons community is a very predatory industry. You've got to look this way. Botox, they're telling people in their 20s now to get Botox to prevent wrinkles. And nobody's talking about the black box warning on Botox. Nobody's talking about the long-term effects and the lack of long-term studies on Botox, fillers, vaccines, medical devices, all the things.
All of it, yeah.
And so when you start empowering other people to find the information, you provide it for them, give them a little nugget, and then they go digging deeper. There's something so powerful about that. And social media, I think, is the one thing they never saw coming. Because I'll be honest with you, I was never on social media. And if I was, I never saw myself talking about my breasts on social media. But it's almost become a badge of honor for women to get on there and share their story and show themselves in a swimsuit 3 years before, so sick. And they just, you can see the pictures don't lie. And I think that's what's powerful too, is you can see the inflammation in their face. You can see that they've aged. They look rough. And then they take their implants out and they have this cute, tiny little, body, and they're more fit. And we call it the fountain of youth, because some women literally look 25 years younger after they explant.
Crazy.
And stagnant lymph, though, expedites the aging process. So it makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. And that's what I was going to say is, like, social media is a double-edged sword in a way. Because it's definitely allowed us to proliferate information that we're wanting to share. Of course, we face censorship, and I'm no stranger to censorship either. And at the same time, we can still have or make massive waves and create change because of social media. And then on the flip side, social media in some cases causes people to compare themselves so much more. And when you have the beauty industry, Botox, fillers, breast implants, all these things, like I feel like that's impacting young women and making it so they think they have to do these things.
Yeah. Well, just recently I posted that Kylie Jenner, who has such a huge influence over young women, just said that she regrets getting breast implants. A lot of people, she never even confirmed that she got them. And so again, that's, I thought it was pretty amazing for someone her age to really already be reflecting on that now that she's a mother. And it's the responsible thing to do. I believe that, just like I feel like my role is just the responsible thing to do. I get people saying to me like, "You're crazy for speaking out," and I say, "No, I need to do what's right for my soul."
Good for you.
At the
Yeah.
end of the day.
Well, I have two more questions, and one of these might be a little bit personal, but like, how has this journey helped to impact both of you to love yourselves on a much deeper level, irrespective of, Robin, you're saying like I'm completely flat chested, like, but you don't seem to care. You're like I. How much do you love yourself, and have you learned to love yourself through this journey, irrespective of that?
For me, I wear it like a badge of honor because this is my survival.
Mm.
I did what I had to do to live and survive and still be there for my family. And it's so freeing to just not care, and I don't, there are people that care more than I do, or they want to look a certain way in their clothes. And so I don't judge anyone for what their feelings are about themselves. You have to do what makes you feel comfortable. But for me, I've never felt more comfortable in my own skin.
That's
Who would have
amazing.
thought it would take a double mastectomy and I literally have no breasts, and I'm 50 years old, to finally feel comfortable in my body. But I had a lot of issues before that. Like, I was always big breasted and I hated it. And I never understood why women would go get a breast augmentation. So for me personally, it was very freeing. I also have kind of a dark sense of humor. So I make jokes about exercising and not having to hold my boobs because that's what I had to do my whole life. And, you just have to make lemonade when life gives you lemons. And I think women are so hard on themselves. I think they try so hard to live up to the ridiculous beauty standards that are out there. But it really is, everyone is so different. Everyone is so beautiful in their own way. And you have to find those things that you're proud of, and just shine. Just shine those things that you love about yourself. So I think it's interesting to see the amount of women who come forward with stories like ours, where, 20 years ago when they got their breast implants, they were very, they were just interested in their looks. And like you said, maybe getting a hot guy or their husband, impressing their husband. But it's a growth process. It's a process of maturity and just wisdom. And Amanda and I are like old souls. We talk about really deep things in a deep spiritual level. And there's just something so rewarding about that.
Well, there's something so superficial about that, like ideology too, that like I need to have bigger boobs to be able to get this guy, right? Like, or look a certain way to get this guy. And it's like, is that a guy that I would want to try to attract anyway, if that's what they're focused on? Like,
Well, and I have to say, so it wasn't just the doctors in those weeks while I was deciding to have my explant. It was some of my guy friends too. And I have a lot of guy friends, and bless them, I still adore them, but they weren't understanding it at the time. Now they've been following me for a while and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe this." But they said to me, like, "Amanda, don't do this. You're going to regret it. Why would you take these out? Just go get saline." And I stopped and I looked at them. And even I remember at one point saying, "Gosh, I haven't even gotten married yet. Is this going to affect like who I meet?"
wow.
And I just persevered. And I looked at both of those friends and I said, "Get out of my way, because I am doing this and nobody's going to stop me, because I need to know if this is the answer." When you don't know what's making you sick, 7.5 years is a long time to suffer every day. And I thought to myself, you know what? No, the guy who's going to get me is going to think I'm a total badass and he's going to love me more for it.
Yeah. Well, and that's what's beautiful about like a journey into holistic health, I'd imagine, for both of you too, is that so much of this superficiality, especially in America, sort of sheds away as you become more well naturally in mind, body, and in spirit. And it's like that, like, lifestyle is no longer really attractive to me.
No, I mean, I even gave up the Botox and I did it for 20 years, but I also don't want to be a hypocrite. I really want to practice what I preach, and I want to be inspiring and empowering to other women and show them like I still want to look my best. But for me, wasn't enough just to remove the implants. I changed my entire life, the way I eat, the water I drink,
Amazing.
everything.
Amazing. Last question that I have, and of course we can touch on whatever else you two want to touch on, is how has this journey impacted you spiritually?
Honestly, it's interesting. I'm a very spiritual person, and I read my Bible and I have spiritual conversations with my friends, and it doesn't matter like what religion or what their beliefs are, but I think all of that reflects inward, right? I mean, we have to dig deep when we go through our hardest times. And being a 3-time cancer survivor and a survivor of BII, and just being a mother and a wife for all the years that I have been, I think it's important. I think it's an important part of growth. I think it's an important part of just maturity and becoming like our next level of our best selves. And honestly, I think it's through the hardest times that we face and suffer through that I've been the most spiritual. Which a lot of times it's when people turn away from that, right? And they'll turn to other things like drugs, addiction. So for me, I really had to dig deep. When you're at your rock bottom and you're going through the worst time you've ever been through in your entire life, where do you turn to? Because a lot of the people that Amanda and I work with, they've lost their friends or family members because they weren't believed. I lost my best friend of 19 years who didn't believe I was sick from my breast implants. Wow. And when I told her I was removing them, because I don't have breasts, her mother-in-law was a breast cancer survivor and ended up having to take her reconstruction out because of infections. She looked right at me and said, "Oh, Robin, you don't want to do that." And I'm like, "No, I do. Like, I have to." And I haven't talked to her since. Wow. And it's been almost 6 years. Yeah. And I mean, she was like my sister. We raised our kids together. We were pregnant together. We went on family vacations together. But at the end of the day, when one door closes, others open. And we just have to do what's best for ourselves, for our family, for our survival, for our spirituality. And I've learned a lot through that, and I don't have any regrets whatsoever.
Yeah, this tested my faith more than anything, and it's a daily practice. I still practice on a daily basis. I've walked with God since I was a little girl, and I walk with God in an even more powerful way now. People say to me, like, "How are you so brave to speak out like you do?" And, I believe that courage is a higher state of consciousness. And the more I trust, the more I am empowered to speak my truth. And I'm not going to stop, no matter what. Like I said, I have to do what's right for my soul. And I'm willing to go against my critics, say whatever. I mean, people do all the time. They're still saying this. That's what they do. They want to make you look crazy, gaslight you, so others don't believe you. I'm here. I'm ready. I'll take it. Yeah. But I'm not going to stop doing what's right because it's making a difference. And these women are getting better.
Yeah, you two are both doing incredible work. I think the floodgates are going to open on this soon, especially as everything else starts crumbling down. I think it's amazing that you two, I am talking to both of you who are probably spearheading that. So it's pretty amazing. Where can people find both of your work if they're interested, if they're struggling with breast implant illness, they're just wanting to learn more information?
I am on Instagram and Facebook. Just generic Robin Tout is my tagline. And then also gpacunited.org. And we have information on our website under the resource tab with all other medical devices as well. We're going to continue to add to our website. We've done a lot of work with mesh patients that have had mesh implants from either hernias or bladder incontinence. We're seeing a lot of problems with that. So our resource tab, we're going to start putting a lot of information on there so people can just have a starting point and then direct them to where they can go to get more research and information and doctors who can help them. Because I think that's important. I think it's important to establish a network where I might not know, but I know people to call. So if I need a holistic practitioner, I'll call Amanda and be like, who would you recommend? Or I'll call you, Alec. So I love just the networking part of that because I want to go to doctors that I can trust. I want like-minded people who know the truth like we do. And when we can connect with people like you and your listeners and your followers, I think that's really, really important. So the more we can help each other, the better we can help other people and just change the world.
Amen.
As crazy as it sounds.
I'm primarily on Instagram, the Holistic Beauty Coach. Like I said, I've been shadow banned since day one of COVID. But, like I always say when they do it to me, hey, God, take care of it. And then one of my videos will go viral and I'll get like 20,000 more people. So I will probably be on there most. I am going to start building up my YouTube as well. But yeah, the Holistic Beauty Coach on Instagram.
Awesome. Well, it was a pleasure talking with both you ladies, and thank you for all your work. This is awesome.
Thank you, Alec, for helping us get the word out.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you for having us.